Today's episode is going to be just a little bit different. We're not talking about addiction, trauma, or battles that many of us face later in life. Instead, we're taking a look at something that could prevent some of those battles from potentially even happening in the first place. And that's raising children who are emotionally secure, grounded in faith, and aware that God watches over them, even when life feels uncertain. And today's story behind that message is just as meaningful. Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode, we have honest conversations with people who've walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with pastors, leaders, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead authentically. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and let's get real. This is Unmasked. Today on Unmasked, I'm joined by somebody whose story offers refreshing shift from our unusual conversation. Scratch that, starting again. Today on Unmasked, I'm joined by somebody who's tongue-tied.
All good.
Today on Unmasked, I'm joined by somebody who offers a refreshing shift from our usual conversations. Tessa is a writer, mother, and grandmother whose passion is helping children develop emotional security and a deep sense of God's presence in their life. Her inspiration comes from a unique encounter in her youth with meeting Mother Alexandra, formerly Princess Ileana of Romania, a woman whose humility and faith left a lifelong impression. After reading about the princess's childhood angelic encounter, Tessa felt compelled to share a message that today's kids desperately need, and that is that God sends his angels to watch over us, and faith in the unseen can give children confidence, courage, and peace long before life storms come their way. Today, we're diving into how to raise spiritually anchored, emotionally resilient kids, and why these foundations matter more now than ever. Tessa, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today on Unmasked.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Glad to have you. Well, let's just jump right into it and give us some of your story and how this chance encounter, I'm going to assume, happened. And I can't wait to hear it.
Well, it started a long, long time ago. I was probably 12 at the time that I met Mother Alexandra. My family was on their way from visiting family in Michigan back to Maryland, where we lived, and just south of Pittsburgh. We stopped at the Monastery of Holy Transfiguration, which had just been founded by Mother Alexandra. This particular monastery was the first women's Eastern Orthodox convent in North America. When my dad introduced me to Mother Alexandra, he said to me, Tessa, Mother Alexandra is a real princess, which being about a 12-year-old girl growing up with Disney princesses and Barbie dolls, that kind of took me. And at the time, she was an older woman, all dressed in black, full habit. And I really did not know at that point who she really was or what her story was. But as I grew older, I came to read her books, and I was very taken by her courage, her faith, and her entire story. So her mother and father were the last reigning king and queen of Romania before the Bolsheviks came in after the Nazis were thrown out at the end of World War II. When the Nazis were there, her family was basically neutered. They had no power. But when the Bolsheviks came in, they were much more harsh, much more cruel, and they exiled her entire family. She was then exiled, and she went to South America, and then through Congress was able to get to this country, which is how she ended up being here in this country. Just a little bit of background on her. She was a cousin of Queen Elizabeth. She was a cousin of Tsar Nicholas of Russia, and she married a Habsburg. So for anybody that knows anything about European royalty and history, those names matter. She has a very impressive family tree. When she was a child, she had 4 older brothers and 1 younger brother. Actually, I think she had 4 older siblings and 1 younger brother. She and her younger brother were asleep in the nursery in the castle, and in the middle of the night, she awoke and there were angels in her room, several of them. She remembered the description of them with such incredible detail. I've often thought to myself, would I remember that much detail about an experience when I was 7 years old? But I suppose if angels showed up in my bedroom, I may have remembered that. But what she didn't know at the time was that her little brother was dying. He was born with a birth defect and it did kill him. So at this time when this happened, she was 7 and he was 3. And he died later that year. Again, I didn't know any of this when I met her, but I learned all of this later. That castle is Bran Castle, which if you go to Bucharest, Romania, is a tourist attraction to this day. If you go to their website, it's actually quite impressive. And that castle also happened to be the inspiration for the entire story of Dracula. So there's a lot of historical reference to this woman and her story. During the war, she built hospitals. She took care of just the worst of the worst situations. And as tough as we think we have it today, with the things that we face, we don't know what it's like to live in an area that's completely bombed out and people walking around with no shoes in the winter and things like that. We can't even wrap our head around that kind of horror. But when you read stories of people who overcame that, and instead of it tearing them apart, it built their strength and their love for Christ and their faith. It's just really an overwhelming feeling. And so I carried all of this with me
Tessa,
for
can I
many
pause you
years.
real? Do you have music playing in the background?
Yeah, there's some Christmas music on.
Yeah.
You want me to
Can you turn it off or turn it down? Because it's overpowering you in a couple of spots.
really? Okay, I'll do it right now. Hold on. Sorry about that. I had it turned down and actually had the door shut, but I suppose it was louder than I thought. Sorry.
That's all right. It was just that song. When it came on, I was like, oh, I hear music all of a sudden.
Yeah, Josh Groban's got that kind of voice.
He does. I love Josh Groban. So go
Okay.
ahead and pick.
So I was kind of at the end of that particular part there. So anyway, go ahead.
So go ahead and just pick up where you left off. And
Well, again, it was just the power of her story that captivated me. And I suppose, really, Wesley, that I had this thing deep in my heart for many years. And so then what happened was about a year and a half ago, my husband and we were at a wedding. And before the wedding, we met with some friends. And these are very good friends of ours. And one of my friends had just written a children's book. And she was presenting it to us and showing it to us. She actually wrote it during COVID so she wouldn't lose her mind. The first thing that came out of my husband's mouth was, well, that's really cool, Pam, but Tessa's had a book in her head for as long as I've known her, and she's just never put pen to paper. And it was about guardian angels. I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and when you enter an Eastern Orthodox church, we don't have statues. The Roman Catholic Church has statues. We have icons. We call them basically windows to heaven. And they are depictions of people who lived before us. None of them are fictitious. We don't worship them, we venerate them. And on the altar there of any Orthodox church, you will see an icon of the angel Michael, who is the warrior archangel, and the angel Gabriel, who is the messenger archangel. Those are the 2 angels that most people know about. But throughout the service, the divine liturgy, you hear words about angels in the prayers. You hear about the cherubim and the seraphim in the hymns. And angels have always kind of been around me. And I never really thought about it until all of this kind of came together for me, that they really are all around us and they do provide heavenly protection for us. We are taught that when you are born, you are assigned a guardian angel, and that angel stays with you for your entire life. You're not assigned another one. You're only assigned one. They are of the 9 classes of angels. Guardian angels are the lowest. Archangels are like number 3. But There are different levels of angels. And so all of this is biblical, by the way. Angels are mentioned almost 200 times in the New Testament. And depending on which Old Testament you ascribe to, anywhere between 111 and 279 times in the Old Testament. So everything that we know about angels is very solid. And getting back to the icon thing, one other thing I wanted to mention is the first person who ever painted an icon was St. Luke. And the first icon that he painted was that of the Virgin Mary. So it's very much a part of the Eastern Orthodox religion. When you go into a church, you'll see angels everywhere. So they've always been around me. And it wasn't really until I gave some thought to this story, and I wish that every child knew, and actually every adult knew, that we have a guardian angel that really does watch over us and that they have been assigned to us. When, you mentioned that you were a veteran, and thank you for your service. I have two sons that are, well, actually one's technically not a veteran. He's still somewhat active duty. He's National Guard now. He just went from active duty to National Guard. But when my older son was deployed into Iraq during Bush's first surge in 2007, I read Psalm 91 every day. It's known as the Soldier's Psalm, and it specifically talks about heavenly protection and his wings over you to protect you. So again, they've just kind of weaved in my life, my whole life. And that's kind of how the story came to be.
That's fascinating. This episode is centered all on, prevention and helping children develop the faith and emotional security before life hits hard. Why do you believe that why do you believe early spiritual formation is so crucial for kids today?
Wow. Well, it's interesting. My husband is in a field where he helps people to understand who they are, in that we have an identity and we have roles. And your identity is who God created you to be. You are made in the image of God. We are all made in the image of God. Whether we believe in him or not, we are all made in his image. And so on our identity side, we are always an I-10, 10 out of 10. On the role side, however, we have many roles. We are friends, we are husbands, we are wives, we are parents, we are children, we are sisters, we are friends. And sometimes our role performance, especially at work, maybe isn't a 10. But many people associate their identity with their role performance. And we're not always a 10 on the role side. Sometimes we're about a 3. Sometimes we don't even want to think about it. But the problem that many people have is that they use that bad role performance and they take it on personally, that I'm a bad person, or I'm not a good believer, or I'm not a good Christian, or I'm not a good whatever. I'm not a good mother. Well, maybe every day I'm not a good mother. I probably haven't been a good mother every day. And God's the only one that's perfect. That's why we have a God. Children have to understand the importance that they are made in God's image and that they're loved so much that there is an angel with them all the time. And I would venture to say that broken children become broken adults. And many people who might be listening to this may be feeling like they're broken. And all I can say to you is you're no more broken than the rest of us. And we just need to remember that we are children of God. We are made in his image. He loves us more than anybody else on this planet could love us, even our own parents. And that he wants the best for us. And that he wants that all be saved and no one be lost. And that he does send messengers to carry our prayers to him, to his throne. We have intercessors. And we're never alone. And that was really the story that I'm trying to convey in my storybook. There are 2 different parts where both major characters, the character who plays Princess Ileana, Her name is Elizabeth, and her little brother is Prince Brenner. And there are parts in the story where both of them literally are on their knees praying. And so I want children to know that prayer is a normal thing. In a Christian home, if we're not praying before we eat, or praying before we go to bed, or praying before when we wake up, or praying throughout the day. I remember when I used to carpool, I had Christian radio on all the time just to be a constant reminder to be praying all day long. So whatever it takes for you to get to that point, make it intentional in your life. It's important. And again, broken children become broken adults. So when you become a parent, you realize I brought this child into the world. The next 20 years are not mine. They're theirs. And if I'm not willing to put in what I'm supposed to put in to raise them in the way that they should go, you know, I think that's something we're all going to have to answer to one day. But on the other side of the coin, again, we're not perfect parents. We all make mistakes, and we all need to learn how to say, I'm sorry and forgive me. But the sooner we do that, the better. And when our children see that we also are not perfect, then they will not feel that they need to be perfect either. I hope that
Yeah,
matters.
that's a great point, because that's something I say quite frequently on this show. It's very easy for us to say, well, this happened to me, and so that automatically makes me a bad guy, a bad girl, a bad dad, a bad mom, a bad whatever. And we let it define who we are moving forward. Whatever happened in that one moment now define the rest of our lives. And I frequently say this, it's kind of become my calling card, if you will. And that is that you are not defined by the things that have happened to you. You're not defined by the things that you've done, and you're not defined by the way you were brought up. You're defined only by who you say you are. And more importantly, you're defined by who God says you are. And we are all broken people. None of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. It's what we do with those mistakes. And today I think it's just having kids of my own, like it's very easy to see. You see the world through a different perspective. You see the brokenness out there, and it's our natural instinct to want to protect them, to shield them, to do everything we can to keep them safe, but that's just not possible. The world's broken. It always has been. And I often hear people say, well, it's more broken today than it was when I was growing up. And I question, I'm like, is it really more broken today, or is it just broken differently because technology has advanced, all these different things? It's still the same world. It's still a broken, fallen world.
It is.
It's just the times have changed a little bit. We have different technology, different things like that. And so when you think about protecting your kids, your grandkids, what tips would you give to a parent, a grandparent that has their kids at home and they're saying, man, this world's just really broken. I don't even know how to protect them and raise them up to realize that it's okay to not be okay. What advice would you give to that person?
Wow. Well, because like right now, all of my children are grown adults. I only have one right now that has children. My youngest just got married about a month ago. Um, all I can tell you is that when my children were younger, I mean, obviously, all of us have things from our own childhood that we look back on without any fondness. And so I think in some ways we try and improve our children's lives because of what we didn't have. And I remember one time calling my dad out, and my dad turned to me and Tessa, your mom and I are not perfect. And we have made some mistakes, but so are you going to make your mistakes. So be very careful when you judge what somebody else is doing or saying or thinking or did or whatever. And so we can only try and envelop them with the kind of love that Christ shows us, which is unconditional love. And that goes back to what I was saying before about identities and roles. Your child misbehaves. So rather than telling them they're bad, you attack their behavior and you share with them that they are not behaving the way that they're supposed to behave. Or you're acting like a brat instead of you're a brat. There's a huge difference. I know somebody whose father used to tell him he was lazy. He wasn't lazy. He was displaying lazy behavior. And so when he grew up, he became this workaholic because he had to overcome his father telling him he was lazy. So our words are powerful. The whole book of James uh, has so much in it, but that one chapter about how like the tongue can be like a rudderless ship and like a knife, and it can be very biting. So when we say things that we regret that we've said, especially where our children are concerned, we need to own it. We need to apologize. We need to fall on the sword. We need to be humble enough to show them that it's okay to acknowledge I'm not perfect. We all fall short of God's glory. That's part of who we are. We can't control what happens, but we can control how we handle what happens. And the sooner that they learn that, and it's reinforced, because that's not a one stop. That's got to be repeated. And so I'd like to think that I'm that kind of a was that kind of a parent to my children. Um, grandchildren, that's a whole nother, because you really do want to spoil them. But at the same time, when you see negative behavior there, I know with one of my granddaughters, she's so high spirited, and I don't want to snuff out the high spiritedness. But when she becomes disrespectful, I have to kind of let her know that was really not a very nice thing to say to your sister or to me or to your mom or to whoever. It's how you say it. And that takes practice, and it takes a lot of personal humility. And that's probably one of my biggest goals, because probably, here I feel like I'm in confession or something. One of my biggest sins is pride. And pride is at the center of everything. The Greek word for me is ego, and that's the way we get the word ego. Our ego needs to be really calmed down. And so being humble is probably my biggest goal now with the years that God gives me left on this planet. I really want to become a more humble servant. And I
You
would
know,
hope that everybody else would possibly. I mean, it's really hard to look in the mirror and see yourself as self-centered and as egotistical as we can be, and how prideful we can be, and wanting to be right. And, well, guess what? We don't live in that world.
yeah, I think pride is an issue for all of us. I mean, again, that goes back to just being human, right? No one wants to admit they're wrong, especially an adult admitting they were wrong to a kid. Like, that is just the hardest thing to do. I know when I've had to do it to my own kids, but like, hey, dad was wrong. I'm sorry. That's talking about eating a piece of humble pie. Like, that's not easy to do.
It's not.
Um, but it's so important because it demonstrates to them that it's okay to fail, and it's just have to admit it and own up to it and move on with life.
And then that becomes their norm, because they
It,
see even a big person can be wrong. But guess what? I'm not only wrong, I'm big enough to say I was wrong. And that is huge to a child. That is a monumental moment for them that they'll never forget, really.
yep,
So we can't underscore that.
absolutely. As a mother and grandmother, what practices or rhythms have you found to be most helpful in nurturing kids emotionally so that they're healthy and spiritually grounded to help prepare them for adulthood?
Well, we were fortunate enough to be able to send our children early on to Christian schools where prayer every day was a norm, just like it was at home. But yeah, you have to be involved in the church, you have to be involved in Bible study, you have to be involved in prayer, you have to be involved in choosing to say and do the right things in front of your children, because they are imitators of you. I'm sure we all have a story where our child came out with something and we thought to ourselves, my gosh, I know right where that came from. And, it's just, again, it comes back to being humble, because it's easy to not have time to have your quiet time in the morning, or to read them a story at night that pleases their soul and gives them peaceful rest. Nighttime is really when Satan loves to be involved in our lives, even with children. And so I would say, I remember I used to rock my children to sleep when they were babies, and I would sing to them. And they even remember those songs. I've never even gotten rid of that rocking chair because I don't have the heart to do it. Not even an expensive chair. It's made out of wood, but I just cannot part with that chair. But singing to them, reading stories to them. When we would go to Christian schools, they have memory verses every week that we would have to memorize, and having them test on the way into school with whoever else was in the car in the carpool. I remember my daughter had to memorize Psalm 100, make a joyful noise unto the Lord. And it was a Thanksgiving psalm. And that was beautiful. And she recited that at that Thanksgiving. And I mean, it brought tears to my eyes to hear a child recite scripture. There's nothing more precious. And then the story of Luke that's on the famous Charlie Brown cartoon, where Linus talks about this is what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown. And it's the whole entry from Luke, a Savior who is Christ the Lord. Everybody remembers little lines like that. But when your children say those and they're knit in their heart, they really never leave them. And I've even heard stories. I actually heard a story once at a women's conference. The speaker was saying that she was in a dressing room of a clothing store one time, and a man came in with a gun, and he started robbing everybody. And she was in the dressing room, so she like quickly got her clothes on, and she said, I don't know what happened to me, but I just walked out of the dressing room and I walked right up to the man with the gun, and I said, in the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, I demand that you stop what you're doing right now. And she said the man dropped the gun and he burst into tears. As the police were taking him away, he turned to the woman and he said, your words bring back my grandmother talking to me as a child. So we really don't know the power of scripture and the power of God's presence and calling out loud. If you can't sleep, go in the other room and call him out loud. Tell him to leave you. And my understanding is that Satan can't read your mind, but he can hear your words. Christ can read your mind. God can read your mind, but Satan cannot. So getting back to your question, it's just the regularity of practices. But if you're not doing them yourself regularly, your children will see it as being a show. You really need to kind of rein it in and recognize, I brought this child into the world. This child deserves the next 20 years of my life.
Man, that's some good stuff right there. I never heard that story before about the lady in the dressing room, but that's powerful. It just, and something I often say is, you have this random thought pop into your head, and you never know why it popped into your head. It could be as simple as something as, I mean, for her, it was walking out of the dressing room up to an armed man, like that. That's just crazy. But
That's faith.
there
That's
it
faith,
is.
though.
But
Think of
there's
the faith that woman had.
absolutely. But it could be as simple as, I can just hear somebody now. Well, I'm never going to, well, okay, you might not have that opportunity, but it could be just as simple as a name that pops into your head. I often will have a name pop into my head, and I'll pull up my phone and I'll send them a text and be like, hey, this just, you popped in my mind, just thinking about you. How can I pray for you? Let's connect, whatever. It's been a while. And 9 out of 10 times, the person's grateful to hear from you. And most of the time I get a thank you so much. Here's what you can pray for me. Here's what's going on. I really need this, and God puts people on your mind for a reason. And you just have to have the faith and the awareness of it to act on it, because you never know the reason that something is brought to mind.
And sometimes it's his angel, that he's using that angel to communicate to you. I remember when I was a child, we watched these cartoons on Saturday morning, and there was one cartoon that had like the good angel on one shoulder and the bad angel on the other shoulder, and they were like fighting back and forth. Do this. No, do this. No, one is telling you to do the good thing, and the other one's telling you. There's really a lot of truth to that. It's kind of amusing when you really think about how it's depicted in a cartoon, But there really is a lot of truth to that. And so, and even I had a friend tell me just the other day, she said, Tessa, I opened my car door and there was a feather, a white feather in my car. And they say that if you find a feather, that it's your angel saying, I'm here. Just because we can't see them doesn't make them not here. It's part of the angelic host that we sing
Interesting.
about at Christmas time, that we don't think about any other time. But they're very real and they're very scriptural.
Never heard that before. Many children today, and really children always, but I'll just say today because we're in today. Many children struggle with fear, anxiety, uncertainty, those types of things. What are some practical ways that parents can help their kids feel safe and secure and loved and guided, especially if they're in the middle of a stressful season?
Well, obviously praying over them, praying with them. I mean, when they see their parents praying, they that translate as this is normal behavior. We create their normal. So that's why our habits are so important. And like I said, not everybody can wake up every morning and read scripture and let their children see them praying and all of those things. They intuitively pick up on things like that. They know before you say, well, we're going to do this. Why don't you say, well, God willing, we're going to do this because God wills everything. Again, it's then the words that you use, the phrases that you use. They're very powerful. And what they see growing up becomes their normal.
Absolutely. That's something that's very important, is to set those normal behaviors early and then keep them going throughout the childhood. And I know that's something my parents did growing up. Prayer was always a part of our lives. Going to church was always a part of our lives. Now, granted, I do come from a ministry household. My dad was a full-time pastor, evangelist. And so church was just a part of it. As a kid, it was very impactful for me. And when things weren't going well, instead of stressing out, my parents would often say, we just have to trust God with it. And then they did it. And they just, at time and time again, we would see God provide. And now in my adulthood, in my adult life, I have things going on where I'm like, well, I just have to trust God with it and he'll provide. And he always has. But that's not the first instinct for most people. And I can only credit my parents with that because that's how I was brought up, was just to trust God when things get tough,
They
that he'll
created your
provide.
normal.
Exactly. That's just my normal. And I have people today that often will say, Wes, how do you do that? How do you have that level of trust? And well, it comes not only from the example, but it also comes from seeing it played out time and time again and seeing God actually come through and provide when we did trust him. And he, like I said, he always has. So that's good, a good tip there. Well, tell us a little bit more about your book. Your book is meant to pass on faith and hope and resilience to future generations. Tell us more about it. What's the name of it? Where can people find it?
Okay. The book is called The Angel Feather, and it's about 900 words long. It's basically for 4 to 8 year olds. I do have a companion coloring book. When my illustrator did the pictures, I had him strip out the color to create a coloring book. And at the end, I have like a crossword puzzle, some mazes, word search, just different fun little things for children to play with so that they can really experience the story. Obviously, 4 to 8 year old is a pretty big span. So some of the pictures are better for 4 year olds than some of the things like the crossword puzzle is probably better for an 8 year old because in order to answer the questions to the crossword puzzle, you have to read the book. So the book is available on my website and on Amazon.com. My website is www.evangelospress.com and then of course you can just type in the Angel Feather or the Angel Feather coloring book at Amazon.com. And it's been out almost 3 months. I'm pleased so far. I've had good sales. I've got a lot of great reviews on both Goodreads and Amazon. I've done several fundraisers where I've been fortunate enough to provide books for a lot of homeless children who are the least among us today. And there's more of them than I'd like to think about. But I look forward to any opportunity to share the story of hope that our guardian angels give us as well as just this fun little story. It's a very sweet story. Again, I've got, the two main characters are praying in it, and it's a very simple story, but it's a very loving story. One of the reasons that I was really driven to write it was because I think that I've noticed with parents, grandparents, teachers, librarians, there's kind of a vacuum right now in good children's literature. We see books for kids today, like even some of the cartoons for kids today that we would never have seen when we were children. And it's kind of off the wall stuff. Plus, AI is now creating books. People can create books out of AI that have no story at all. They have no plot at all. They have no good character development at all. And at the same time, we're removing some of the classics from libraries. So it's important, I think, in keeping with everything we've been discussing, to surround our children with good literature. It's out there and it is available. Sometimes you have to search for it a little bit harder. But one thing, Wesley, that I will share is that when my older son was deployed in Iraq, this isn't about, I'm going to say it was around 2007. And he came home and he told me about a lot of the guys he served with. And it really struck him that not everybody who enlisted in the Army before the Iraq War was raised the way he was. As a matter of fact, some of the guys actually thought he was nuts, that he left all that he grew up with, where in their situations, they enlisted because it was a better choice than staying where they were, which is heartbreaking to me. But for me, it was a reality call of how many, again, broken adults there are because they had broken childhoods. And we can't fix everybody. God can fix everybody, but we can't. But what we can do is start at an early age, again, to bring them up the way that they're supposed to go. And when they grow old, they will not depart from it. And so the sooner we start to break that cycle, the better things are. So that is a lot of the impetus behind why I am trying desperately to get my book out there, because I know there are so many children in need, and there are so many parents who would be comforted to know that even as an adult, they have an angel watching over them. And when they pray, that angel carries their prayers to heaven. And when they want to communicate, angels are God's messengers. That's what the word angelos means. The Greek word for angels is angelos, and that means messenger. And they are real and they are with us. And we may not be able to see them, but they are very much here.
That's good stuff. The last question I have for you is, at the end of every episode, I love to leave my listeners with an action step. And so when you think about raising up kids and making sure that they are emotionally ready, they're spiritually ready, all that fun stuff, what is one action step that the listeners can take today to start moving in that direction?
Pray without ceasing, not just praying for them, but praying with them. Let them see you at the footstool of God, asking for his grace and mercy on a daily basis. Again, what we do is what they will do. Our norm becomes their norm.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, Tessa, so much for being with us today here on Unmasked and sharing your story and about your book and providing the listeners with some insights as to some things that they can do in order to ensure that their children are being brought up so that they are emotionally healthy and spiritually healthy to prepare them for adulthood.
Yeah, one last recommendation.
Yeah.
When I started deep diving about angels, because I wanted to do some real research before I started feeling like I had any opinion. Billy Graham and Dr. David Jeremiah have both written excellent books on angels. So I would highly recommend, if you have any doubts, both of those books are excellent.
Okay. Well, listeners, if you want more information on Tessa or how to find her book, check the show notes down below or on your screen, depending on where you're looking or watching us today. And I'll have those linked there so that you can find her easily and find that book. Thank you, listeners, for joining me today on Unmasked. Huge thanks again to Tessa for sharing. If something on this episode spoke to you, don't let it stop with you. Share it with one person that God put on your heart while you were listening. You never know where a breakthrough might start simply because you shared a message. If you want more encouragement or more information on me and having me speak at your church or events, you can find everything about me at wesleyfarnsworth.com. And make sure you join the Unmasked community by connecting with me on social media so that we can walk this journey together. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and real freedom begins the moment that we choose to live unmasked. God bless you.